Ever wondered what's really going on behind the closed doors of international relations? We often get snippets from news headlines, carefully curated sound bites, but rarely the full picture. And when it comes to the relationship between Canada and the United States, especially under the lens of a figure as distinctive as Donald Trump, the picture becomes even murkier. It's not just about trade deals or border security. It's about perceptions, assumptions, and the complex dance between two nations that are both neighbors and, in many ways, polar opposites. Think about it. Canada, generally perceived as the polite, peacekeeping nation, and the U.S., often projecting an image of unwavering strength, and sometimes, let's be honest, a bit of swagger. These contrasting identities inevitably lead to interesting and sometimes tense dynamics. But what happens when the leader of one of these nations has, well, let's just say a very particular way of expressing himself? That's what we're diving into today. We're not just talking about policy. We're talking about the intangible, the unspoken, the often misunderstood undercurrents that shape international relations. Now, you might be thinking, why should I care what one person thinks about another country? And that's a fair question. But consider this. The perceptions of a leader, particularly one as influential as the former President of the United States, can have very real consequences. They can influence trade agreements, diplomatic relations, and even public opinion. What Trump thinks or thought about Canada matters because it directly impacts the lives of Canadians, from the price of groceries to the ease of travel across the border. It's about understanding the forces at play that shape our world, even the ones that seem to exist only in the realm of personal opinion. So, we're going to unpack this. We're going to look beyond the surface level, beyond the tweets and the headlines, and try to understand the deeper currents of this relationship. We're going to explore the historical context, the economic realities, and the cultural differences that contribute to these perceptions. We're going to try to get a sense of what really goes on when these two nations interact and what the implications are for the future. It's a journey into the heart of international relations, seen through the lens of one of its most controversial figures. We're not here to take sides or pass judgment. We're here to understand, to dig a little deeper, to ask the tough questions, and to offer a nuanced perspective on a relationship that is both vital and, at times, incredibly perplexing. So, buckle up, grab a double-double and an Nanaimo bar, and let's get started, eh? Now, you might be asking yourself, why even bother dissecting the thoughts of one individual on an entire country? Well, the truth is, when that individual wields the kind of power the President of the United States does, their perceptions, however skewed or accurate, can have a profound impact. Think of trade negotiations, border security, even cultural exchanges. All these areas are influenced directly or indirectly by the leader's understanding or misunderstanding of their northern neighbor. It's like trying to navigate a winding road with a map drawn by someone who's only ever glanced at the territory from a distance. You might end up in a completely different place than you intended. To truly grasp the complexities of what someone like Trump might think or have thought about Canada, we need to rewind a bit and look at the historical backdrop. The relationship between Canada and the United States has always been a bit complicated. We're talking about two nations sharing the longest undefended border in the world, yet with vastly different histories, political systems, and cultural identities. Think back to the American Revolution. What side did the Canadians support? Well, many remained loyal to the British Crown, a decision that shaped the very fabric of Canadian identity. Then there's the War of 1812, a conflict that, while technically a draw, solidified a sense of distinctiveness and independence in Canada. Fast forward to the 20th century, and you see Canada playing a pivotal role in both world wars, often standing shoulder to shoulder with the United States, but always with a clear sense of its own national interests, Economically, the two countries have become deeply intertwined, with billions of dollars in trade flowing across the border every day. This integration, however, hasn't always been smooth. There have been disputes over resources, trade barriers, and even cultural protectionism. Canada has often felt the need to protect its cultural industries from being completely overshadowed by the sheer dominance of American entertainment and media. Now, consider the political landscape. Canada has traditionally embraced a more social democratic approach to governance with universal health care, stronger social safety nets, and a greater emphasis on multilateralism. The United States, on the other hand, has generally favored a more free-market, individualistic approach with a greater emphasis on military strength and unilateral action. These fundamental differences in political philosophy can lead to misunderstandings and friction, especially when leaders with vastly different worldviews come into play. So, when we talk about what someone like Trump thinks about Canada, we're not just talking about personal opinions. We're talking about the culmination of centuries of history, economic interdependence, and political divergence. It's a complex tapestry woven with threads of cooperation, competition, and, at times, outright conflict. Understanding this historical context is crucial to understanding the nuances of the present-day relationship. It's about recognizing that the perceptions of a leader, however fleeting, are built upon a foundation of historical realities and enduring national identities. And those perceptions can have very real consequences for both countries. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of some of the key areas where these perceptions really matter. We're talking trade, defense, and even cultural identity. When it comes to trade, the Canada-United States relationship is one of the largest in the world. Billions of dollars worth of goods and services cross the border every day, supporting jobs and livelihoods in both countries. But this relationship isn't always sunshine and roses. Remember the renegotiation of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Trump famously labeled it the worst trade deal ever made and pushed for significant changes, ultimately resulting in the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. This renegotiation process was fraught with tension, with Canada feeling pressured to make concessions to avoid being shut out of the American market. Then there's the issue of defense. Canada and the United States are close allies, sharing a commitment to collective security through NATO and NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. But even in this area, there can be disagreements. The United States has often pressured Canada to increase its defense spending, arguing that Canada isn't pulling its weight in terms of contributing to shared security. This raises questions about Canada's role in the world and its relationship with its more powerful neighbor. Should Canada prioritize military spending to appease the United States, or should it focus on other areas, such as peacekeeping and international development? And let's not forget about cultural identity. Canada has always been concerned about protecting its cultural industries from being overwhelmed by the United States. Think about the Canadian content regulations that require broadcasters to air a certain percentage of Canadian-made programming. These regulations are designed to ensure that Canadian voices and stories are heard, even in the face of the massive American entertainment industry. But these regulations can also be seen as protectionist measures that limit consumer choice. So, what's the right balance between protecting Canadian culture and allowing for the free flow of ideas and entertainment? These are complex questions with no easy answers, and they're all influenced by the perceptions and priorities of leaders on both sides of the border. It's about understanding that the Canada-United States relationship is a constant balancing act, a negotiation between economic interests, security concerns, and cultural preservation. And the perceptions of leaders like Trump can significantly tip the scales in one direction or another. So, how do these perceptions ripple outward and affect the broader landscape? Let's consider the impact on international relations. Public. opinion, and even environmental policy. When the leader of the United States expresses skepticism or hostility towards Canada, it can have a chilling effect on the entire international community. It can undermine trust in multilateral institutions and embolden other nations to pursue more unilateral approaches. Think about the Paris Agreement on climate change. When the United States withdrew from the agreement, it sent a signal to the world that international cooperation on environmental issues was no longer a priority. This decision had a direct impact on Canada, which has committed to ambitious climate goals. Public opinion is also heavily influenced by the perceptions of leaders. When Trump repeatedly criticized Canada's trade practices, it undoubtedly shaped the way many Americans viewed their northern neighbor. This can lead to increased protectionism, reduced cross-border travel, and even strained personal relationships. It's a reminder that words matter, especially when they're spoken by someone in a position of power. And let's not forget about the impact on environmental policy. Canada and the United States share a vast network of waterways and ecosystems. Cooperation on environmental issues is essential to protecting these shared resources. But when the leader of one country prioritizes economic growth over environmental protection, it can undermine these efforts. Think about the Keystone XL pipeline, a controversial project that was repeatedly blocked and then revived under different administrations. This project highlights the tension between economic interests and environmental concerns, and it underscores the importance of having leaders who are committed to working together to protect the planet. The Canada-United States relationship is about more than just trade and security. It's about shared values, common interests, and a commitment to working together to address global challenges. And the perceptions of leaders can either strengthen or weaken these bonds. It's a reminder that international relations are not just about treaties and agreements. They're about people, perceptions, and the power of leadership. Now, let's tackle some of the common misconceptions and controversies surrounding the Canada-United States relationship, particularly as they might be viewed through a certain lens. One common misconception is that Canada is simply a smaller, weaker version of the United States. This ignores the fact that Canada has a distinct culture, history, and political system. Canada has its own unique identity, shaped by its history as a British colony, its bilingual and multicultural society, and its commitment to social justice. Another misconception is that Canada is somehow freeloading off the United States, relying on American military power for its security without contributing its fair share. While it's true that Canada's defense spending is lower than that of the United States, Canada still plays an important role in international security, participating in peacekeeping missions, providing humanitarian aid, and working with allies to combat terrorism. Then there's the controversy over trade. Some argue that Canada's trade practices are unfair, that it uses protectionist measures to shield its industries from competition. Others argue that the United States is the one engaging in unfair trade practices, using its economic power to bully smaller countries into making concessions. The truth is that both countries have engaged in protectionist measures at times. The key is to find a balance between protecting domestic industries and promoting free and fair trade. And let's not forget about the debate over energy policy. The United States has long been a major consumer of Canadian energy, particularly oil and natural gas. But there's been controversy over the environmental impact of extracting and transporting these resources. Some argue that Canada should prioritize renewable energy sources over fossil fuels, while others argue that Canada has a responsibility to provide energy to the United States, even if it means sacrificing some environmental protections. These are complex issues with no easy answers, and they're often clouded by misinformation and political rhetoric. It's important to approach these issues with a critical eye, to examine the evidence, and to consider all sides of the story. And it's important to remember that the Canada-United States relationship is a two-way street. Both countries have benefited from this relationship, and both countries have a responsibility to work together to address the challenges that lie ahead. So, as we wrap things up, let's take a moment to reflect on the bigger picture. What does it all mean? Why does it matter what one person thinks about another country? Well, as we've seen, perceptions can have a profound impact on international relations, trade, security, and even cultural identity. The Canada-United States relationship is a complex and multifaceted one, shaped by history, economics, politics, and culture. It's a relationship that's constantly evolving, adapting to changing circumstances and new challenges. And it's a relationship that requires constant attention, careful nurturing, and a willingness to understand different perspectives. Perhaps the most important takeaway is the need for empathy and understanding. It's easy to fall into the trap of making generalizations and stereotypes about other countries and cultures. But it's crucial to remember that every country is made up of diverse individuals with their own unique experiences and perspectives. By taking the time to learn about other cultures, to listen to different voices, and to challenge our own assumptions, we can build stronger relationships and create a more peaceful and prosperous world. And that's something that benefits everyone, regardless of where they live or what their political beliefs are. So, the next time you hear someone making a sweeping statement about Canada or the United States, take a moment to pause and reflect. Ask yourself, is this really true? What's the evidence? Am I being fair? By asking these questions, we can become more informed citizens and contribute to a more nuanced and productive dialogue about the world around us. And that's perhaps the most valuable lesson of all. Shifting gears now, it's worth considering how these high-level perceptions translate into real-world policy maneuvers. We've touched on trade, but the devil's often in the details, those granular regulations, tariffs, and quotas that can make or break entire industries. Take, for instance, the softwood lumber dispute, a recurring saga that's been grinding away for decades. The Americans have consistently accused Canadian lumber producers of being unfairly subsidized, allowing them to sell their products south of the border at artificially low prices. Consequently, hefty duties are slapped on Canadian lumber, impacting everything from housing construction in the U.S. to forestry jobs back home in B.C. It's a bit like accusing your neighbor of using a souped-up snowblower to clear their driveway, faster than you can shovel yours, and then demanding they pay you for the privilege. The thing is, the Canadian forestry industry operates under a different set of rules, with stumpage fees and crown land leases that are fundamentally different from the private land ownership model common in the U.S. Understanding these differences is crucial, but sometimes perceptions, fueled by protectionist sentiments, can override the facts. Another crucial layer to peel back is the influence of domestic politics. The President of the United States isn't just dealing with Canada. They're also dealing with their own electorate, their own political base, and their own set of priorities. Sometimes, taking a hard line on Canada can be a way to score points. At home, to project an image of strength and resolve. Consider, for example, how certain states heavily reliant on specific industries might lobby for protectionist measures against Canadian competition. It's a delicate dance, balancing international relations with domestic political considerations. Now, consider how this applies when you face rising costs at the grocery store. The price of produce, often imported from the U.S., can be directly affected by trade disputes and tariffs. A seemingly abstract disagreement between political leaders can translate into a very real impact on your wallet. Similarly, think about the tourism industry. A perceived lack of hospitality, or even outright hostility from the U.S., can deter Canadian tourists from crossing the border, impacting businesses and jobs in both countries. The effects are interwoven, and it's essential to recognize that international relations aren't just about grand pronouncements and diplomatic summits. They're about the everyday lives of ordinary people. It all circles back to understanding that the relationship between Canada and the U.S. is more akin to a long-term marriage than a casual fling. It requires constant work, compromise, and a Willingness to see things from the other person's point of view, even when that person is, shall we say, a bit difficult. So, after all that unpacking, where does that leave us, eh? We've taken a good hard look at the historical currents, the economic push and pull, and the political gamesmanship that color the Canada-US relationship. It's less like a simple black and white photo and more like a watercolor painting, with shades bleeding into each other and the overall picture shifting depending on the light. What's abundantly clear is that these perceptions, these sometimes subtle and sometimes not so subtle biases, they're not just abstract ideas floating in the ether. They're the wind that fills the sails of policy, the current that pulls the rudder one way or another. Reflecting on this journey so far, it's like we've been building a puzzle, piece by piece. We started with the big, obvious chunks, the trade agreements, the border security, and then we started filling in the smaller, more intricate details, the cultural nuances, the historical baggage, and the ever-present influence of domestic politics. And as the puzzle starts to come together, a clearer picture emerges, revealing the complex and often contradictory nature of this relationship. It's not a story of pure harmony, nor is it a tale of constant conflict. It's something in between, a delicate balancing act that requires constant attention and a willingness to understand the other side's perspective. Mind you, it's not always easy. Sometimes it feels like we're stuck in a never-ending hockey game, with both sides vying for position and occasionally taking a few cheap shots. But at the end of the day, we're still on the same ice, sharing the same rink. And that shared space demands a certain level of respect, a willingness to play fair, and a recognition that we're all in this together. As such, there's a real need to understand how perceptions can influence actions, and how those actions in turn can ripple outward and affect the lives of ordinary Canadians and Americans. It's all interwoven like a good old braided rug. What's plain to see is that a deeper understanding of these complexities is crucial for navigating the future. It's about moving beyond simplistic narratives and embracing the nuances of this vital relationship. It's about recognizing that the perceptions of leaders matter, but they're not the only thing that matters. It's about fostering a sense of mutual respect and understanding, even when we disagree, and that, in turn, requires a willingness to listen, to learn, and to engage in constructive dialogue. So, with the finish line in sight, we're left contemplating the path ahead. What can we, as individuals, do to promote a more informed and nuanced understanding of the Canada-US relationship? How can we challenge misconceptions and stereotypes? And how can we ensure that our leaders are making decisions based on facts, not just perceptions? These are the questions that will shape the future of this vital partnership. And so, we come to the end of the line. We've poked around, kicked the tires, and taken a good long gander at what shapes the relationship between Canada and the U.S., especially when seen through the lens of someone with, well, a particular point of view. It's a bit like figuring out why the family dog barks at the mailman. There's history, there's territory, and there's probably a healthy dose of misunderstanding involved. What's hopefully become crystal clear is that this isn't just about politics or economics. It's about people. It's about the everyday folks on both sides of the border who are just trying to make a living, raise their families, and enjoy a bit of peace and quiet. And their lives are directly impacted by the decisions made by those in power, decisions that are often influenced by perceptions, biases, and agendas. The real trick, then, isn't just to understand what someone like Trump thinks about Canada. It's to understand how those thoughts, those perceptions, translate into concrete actions that affect us all. It's about recognizing the power of perception and challenging ourselves to see beyond the surface level. It's about fostering a sense of empathy and understanding, even when we disagree. Ultimately, the Canada-US relationship is like a garden. It needs constant tending, weeding, and watering. It requires a willingness to compromise, to cooperate, and to see things from the other person's point of view. And it requires a commitment to building a brighter future. Together, it's about more than just being neighbors. It's about being good neighbors. And that starts with understanding each other, warts and all. The true practice begins now, with each of us taking a more critical and engaged approach to the information we consume, the opinions we form, and the decisions we make. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of this vital relationship. So, go forth, be curious, be informed, and be good to each other, eh?